Okay. Good evening, all. Welcome to Abhini Show. This is the time to bust some myths about teachers. So I have D. Russel Thomas with me, Deputy Lieutenant of Gloucestershire. After a lot of practice, I learned to pronounce this word. She's appointed by Queen and educational consultant, international inspector, and D also a global goodwill ambassador and UK director, UK GGA director of child welfare. Welcome, D. Welcome to Abhini Show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, Pooja. It's very kind of you.
Yeah, Dee, I have lot of things heard about teachers and teaching as a profession. I don't know if those are myths or reality. As you have worked as education consultant, I think you have been working with a lot many teachers and you have interacted with them, what they are and what they're not. So I would like to hear from you. So now stage is all yours. Kindly enlighten me on what teachers are and what not.
Thank you so much. You're quite right. I am very old and decrepit now, and I've been in the field of education for many, many years as a teacher initially, and then latterly I'm now inspecting in schools overseas a lot, and I've done the same in the UK. I speak from my own experience, and I speak as a former teacher, as a consultant, as an inspector, watching and observing teachers. And these are my impressions. But I think one of the most frustrating things is, and I think I said to you when we spoke earlier, that it's the myth busting that we need to get to grips with. I've been so appreciative of the work that you've been doing in this area, because teaching can be a very stressful occupation. It's a very demanding occupation. It's a vocation in many respects. And yet there are still so many myths associated with it. So if I may, I'd like to take this opportunity to go through some of those myths, and maybe people watching or listening can decide initially, is that true or is it not true? What I'll try to do now is to share my screen and go through this PowerPoint that I presented. I don't want to give you death by PowerPoint, but hopefully it will explain a little bit more. Okay. So this is just a little bit about who I am. And as Pooja says, I'm a global goodwill ambassador. And I've worked in the field of education for a long, long time, many, many years, in many different areas, from primary right through to secondary, tertiary, overseas, here, etc., etc. Here's a list of some of the areas that I've studied. So it's Power of the Individual was my first degree, which was all about pupil power and how strong they could be and what influence they might have on their own education and the rights and responsibilities aspect. And I went on to exogenous and endogenous depression and suicide amongst young people in particular. Then worked in Australia for many years, teaching English as an additional language was a course that I did there. I came back to university over in the UK and looked at eating disorders and self-harm. Then I looked at Breaking the Silence, which was all about trying to make the school and classrooms accessible for young children or students who had been abused in some way and who needed an opportunity to disclose, which is an interesting area. I worked in the field of race equality and diversity, running the service in Gloucestershire. Well done on your pronunciation, by the way. It's not an easy one. Nobody gets it right. And the spelling's horrific of Gloucestershire. And I moved on to, during COVID and the pandemic, I did many, many courses And some of those included ones at Santa Cruz, Harvard, and Yale on feminism, social justice, family engagement, and the science of happiness, which is interesting because I've actually been doing a book on, a whole year book actually, on the 12 months of kindness with the Global Goodwill Ambassadors, and they have been brilliant in their contributions. That's a little bit about my background. I think it's also important to say I've got 3 children of my own. And my 3 children, they probably hate me for saying this, so hopefully they won't be listening. But my 3 grown-up children, the eldest dyslexic, dyspraxic, the next one was an asthma sufferer for a lot of his life at school. And the youngest one was an interesting character, and an English teacher really channeled his rebellion into debating, and he became a youth debater in Europe, but it could have gone anyway. And I now have 4 grandchildren, and they're also diverse. And that's what's really important about teaching, is understanding diversity in all its forms. I don't just mean culturally, it's understanding that and knowing that one has to reach every single child, every student in the class. It's not just massive generic teaching. So what about teachers? Are they saints? Are they demons? Are they a little bit in between? Do they have good days? Do they have bad days? Are they just people trying to help children learn? That's certainly why I went into the profession in the first place. Not because actually I thought I would be the greatest, but I did think I might be better than some of the teachers I had experienced. And I'm going back a long way. And I think moving on, I would say we all remember our schooling because we've all been to school. We remember many of our teachers. We recall our school days, sometimes good, sometimes bad. And everybody feels they know everything there is to know about teachers, about schools, and about teaching. But do they? Do they really? Do we make the same judgments about doctors and accountants and lawyers and dentists? I don't think we do. I think we tend to do this about teachers because we've all been to schools, and therefore we think we know everything behind the scenes. You and I know, Pooja, that is not true. It's not true at all. So, Pooja, I'm sure this is true of you. Do you remember your favorite teacher? I certainly do.
Yes,
I remember, yeah?
Yes.
I remember my first teacher's name, Miss Giles, and I was 4.5. And you know, that was many, many decades ago, but I still remember her. I can remember exactly what she looked like. I also remember who was really special to me, who was good. I had an English teacher whom I wasn't very kind to really, but she was quite amazing. And interestingly, bless her heart, she only died last week. And I reunited with her many, many years later and said, I'm really sorry. I was not a model pupil, but I want you to know you made a difference to me. You really did. And she was quite surprised. And she said, no, you were awful. I remember you, but thank you. And we became friends and we've been in touch ever since. And as I say, last year she died at nearly 100 years of age. However, do you also remember your worst teacher? And I can say this now because this teacher is long gone. And his name was Mr. Fowles. And I was 8 years of age. And he was foul by name and foul by nature. He used to beat people. He would hit us. He would pick on the least academic child. And I could always remember poor little David being picked on and hit for not being able to read or not being able to do his maths. And I remember him shaking me once so hard that I wet myself. And it was because I was reading too fast, probably because I wanted to get to the end of the story. I'm telling you this really because I'm trying to say, look at the influence we have as teachers. Look at what effect we can have. We don't even realize it sometimes on children growing up. It's quite frightening. We are really in a position of power. So we can have that positive influence And surely we want to be remembered for the right reasons, not the wrong ones. We know in the profession, just like any other profession, the good, the bad, the ugly, we know that there are good teachers, there are better teachers, there are not such good ones. But I've got to be honest, throughout my whole career, both in the profession as a teacher, as a head of organizations, as an inspector, and as a consultant, most teachers want to go into the profession to make a positive difference. There are always a few exceptions, but there are across all professions. But I personally have encountered more teachers who are hardworking, dedicated, kindly, sincere, and concerned than I have to the contrary. Okay, let's have a myth or truth. Hey, teaching is easy. Right. How many times have we heard this? How insulting is that? Anybody who says that has never taught, or they've never lived with somebody who's a teacher, because my husband will back me up 100%. What about the preparation? What about all the marking? What about the patience you have to have? The examination preparation? What about looking after classes that are diverse, where you might have 10 different languages spoken in one class? You may have ability levels that go from the special needs child right through to the most academic, and you're trying to juggle all that. What about all the parents' evenings and the reports that they have to be written and the deadlines? Teachers have to be all professions. They have to be a nurse, they have to be a childminder, they have to be a carer, a social worker, a parent, a counsellor, a me. Oh my goodness, it goes on and on and on. At this point in time, I'm not trying to put teachers on a pedestal. I'm not trying to say, woe is us, we have had the toughest profession in the world. No, we haven't. We absolutely haven't. We've had a joyous profession in many ways. And there are other people. When I was clapping during the pandemic, we used to clap on a Thursday night for people who were working in the services, the NHS, the nurses, the doctors, and we were clapping for teachers. Me, I was putting out banners as well, because I was clapping for the refuse collectors who were picking up the bins. I was clapping for the people who were working in the shops and the pharmacies. I'm not trying to say that teachers are special above anybody else. I'm just trying to say they don't deserve the flack that sometimes the media and the press and public give them, simply because all those folk think they know the insides and outsides of teaching when they don't. So we're back onto the myths. Hey, teachers work 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock and have endless holidays. Oh, come on, let's get real now. Yes, the official hours are 9 o'clock until 3 o'clock, or in other cases, it might be 8 till 4, or whatever it might be in different countries. That isn't the only time that teachers are working. They're working before and after school. They do a large percentage of their holidays and over every weekend. You just have to look at the bags they're carrying in and out of school. That will give you a little bit of guidance. Or the things that they're carrying in between classrooms. Let's have another one. Myth or truth? Wow, teachers just sit behind the desk all day. Oh, don't we wish that that were true? Of course it's not true. We don't sit behind a desk all day, and the teachers now in this modern world don't do that at all. Interestingly, with our Fitbits, research has shown that teachers can often clock up 20,000 steps a day. Tell me they sit behind their desk all day, every day. They don't. Especially in primary schools, they're having to move around those classrooms regularly, checking that Abdul is in his seat, that Mohammed understands what's being done, that Josie is crying and we're not quite sure what's wrong with her, etc., etc. And in the secondary school, exactly the same. You're working around the different desks, seeing what the group work is like. How are they coping? Do they need any more input? Who needs help, etc., etc. They don't do that. They move around the class, they move around the buildings, they do playground duty. Yes, it's funny, isn't it? Other professions, you actually get a break when you can sit down and have a coffee, or you can sit down and you can have your lunch in peace. You can even go out. You will find that many, many teachers don't take those breaks. Either they're on a duty, or they're dealing with a small child who's upset or who's fallen over, or who's got an adolescent angst that needs dealing with, or somebody has got a serious problem back with their family, or they've got difficulty with the subject, or they're doing after school subjects, clubs, or they're doing activities during the lunchtime. There are so many things going on. No wonder they're doing 20,000 steps a day. No wonder they're quite fit. On to the next one. Myth or truth? Teachers build up a resilience against germs and bugs. They don't get sick. We do. We truly do get sick. Interestingly, we pick up germs quite quickly because we are in an environment where there are lots and lots of young children who've got colds and sniffly noses, they've got sore throats, they've got coughs. The teacher is talking quite a lot, therefore their vocal cords sometimes get damaged. And also, interestingly, and I'm sure people will relate to this, often on a Friday when schools have finished, a teacher will go home and wake up the next day feeling poorly. It could be a migraine, because often with migraines, anybody who's a migraine sufferer will know that as soon as you relax, as soon as the adrenaline goes, the migraine can kick in. I know so many teachers, so many, who have finished on Friday really tired, only to wake up in the morning and the whole weekend is in a darkened room because they're not feeling terribly well and they're still trying to get their work done at the same time. Again, I'm not playing a violin for teachers. I'm just giving you the other side of the story. And what has been shown very clearly during the pandemic, teachers do pick up germs and viruses. Look how many actually contracted COVID. We're just like everybody else. Myth or truth? Huh. Anyone can be a teacher. Oh, yes. Again, that's from somebody who's not been in a classroom since they left when they were a child. I really do believe that. Not anybody can be a teacher. Just try it. Try it for a day. I know with my own family, I've had people who've been put right off teaching, and I've had those who can see the rewards as well. And my husband, who's not in the teaching profession at all, would say, I could never, ever do that. The patience that is needed, the time that's put in, the energy, and the fact that you're on the go all the time, it never seems to end. It wouldn't be for him. I couldn't do his job either. But anyway, teachers need patience, understanding, creativity. They need flexibility because they've got to reach all children. It's not about, as I said earlier, just generic teaching of a mass of a class. It's not a mass. It's built up and made up of individual children, students who've got individual personal learning needs. Classroom management can be such a big issue and can be so difficult for young teachers and older, actually. Certainly in some cultures, it's more prevalent than in others, in that it can be very hard to manage adolescents. It can be extremely hard. I remember, I have to say, I'll give you a little bit of an anecdote. When I first started teaching a million years ago, it was in the time when the government in the UK brought in something called Russel, which was the raising of the school leaving age. which meant that all those young adolescents who hated school and who couldn't wait to leave and earn money and be all grown up were told at 15, oh, sorry, we've changed the rules. You've got to stay another year. And I was teaching them. They didn't want to be there. I'm not sure I wanted to be with them at that point in time. It was hard because what we then had to do was to find as many different strategies to engage those people who didn't initially want to be there, to motivate them, to help them to learn, to help them to utilize that year, to make those lessons interesting, to make them personal, to make them relevant to what they thought was relevant, and to secretly try to educate them without them almost realizing it. It wasn't easy, but I do think teaching is even harder today. Myth or truth? Primary teachers don't need to be very academic. Oh my goodness, I've heard this so many times. And I have to say, I have also heard disputes between primary and secondary teachers on who has the more difficult job, has to be more academic. And all I would like to say to that is, it's not a competition. It's not about who is more or less academic, because actually all teachers, be they primary, be they early years, be they tertiary, they have to have their own subject knowledge. And in most countries, teachers require a degree. They're expected to understand the methodology, the pedagogy, and also the subject knowledge so that they know, in the words of John Holt, who wrote the well-known books, How Children Learn and How Children Fail. That's so important. And they've got to show how and understand how children and students and pupils can be motivated, and how you can actually differentiate within the classroom, and how you can moderate your lessons to suit all needs. And it's also really important to teach our youngsters how to fail. Fail is really important in learning. F-A-I-L, first attempt in learning. We need to teach our young people how to deal with that. And because when they can deal with that, then they will try more. Then they will make attempts. My eldest son, who I told you was dyslexic and dyspraxic, had to write an essay when he was about 8 or 9 years old. And he wrote something along the lines, the cat sat on the mat. It was awful. And I couldn't understand it. And I said, why did you just write that? Why? I know your vocabulary is better. You've got extended lexis. We play story games and creative things all the days. And he said, because he couldn't spell because he's dyslexic, but he was bright. And he said, Mum, I have a choice. I can either let the teacher think that I am lazy, so I write the cat sat on the mat, or I write the story I want to write with hundreds of spelling mistakes, and she thinks I'm stupid. Which would you choose? That was my 8-year-old son. Oh my goodness, that was such a learning curve for me, realizing that actually he was right. You'd rather be lazy than stupid. So we need to make our young people in our classrooms comfortable with making mistakes, comfortable with trying and not succeeding. Because if you keep trying, you improve all the time. I don't think we've been that good at doing that for many years, but we're better now. Myth or truth? Those who can do and those who can't teach. Oh my goodness, I don't know how many more insults we're expected to take here. I mean, what is that all about? How rude is that to say that? But people say it, don't they? They do say that. Teaching can be an undervalued area, but it's a highly specialized field, just like other professions. And when you think about it, as teachers, who are we in charge of? Who are we educating? Who have we got the power over to make things work or not work? We're actually educating all the other professions, because our children, our students and pupils are our future scientists, our politicians, they're our business entrepreneurs, they're our doctors, our surgeons. We're teaching the astronauts of the future. Sorry, I've got a spelling mistake there. Reporters, that's the dyslexic profile. Judges, lawyers, dentists, engineers. Every one of these people goes through schools. And what's the common denominator that they've got? They've got these teachers who don't know anything, apparently. Hey, myth or truth? Teachers are overpaid. Oh, yeah? That's an interesting one. I haven't done the statistics, so I don't know across the world what these salaries are. I can only speak for certain areas where I have taught, certain countries, and obviously here in the UK. I'm not saying we're on the poverty line, but anybody who wishes to be a millionaire, don't go into teaching. Not a good idea, because that isn't what's going to happen. Nobody's saying it's awful pay, but it's certainly not on a par with many other professions. And I think that that's important to just state that, because then we can say, therefore, most teachers who have gone into the teaching profession have gone into it not to make money. They've gone into it for other reasons. They've gone into it because they want to make a difference. Another myth or truth: teachers have a lot of spare time during the day. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. The more I see these myths, the more I'm thinking we ought to write lots and lots of books on this to explain this is not a truth. Of course they don't. They've got lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson. One thing that teachers have been particularly experts on, they've been phenomenally clever at this, they hold their bladders. We can't even go to the bathroom when we want to. We can't have a drink when we want to. We can't take a break when we want to, whereas most other professions actually can be more flexible. We have to go in lesson after lesson, and in the breaks and the lunch times, as I indicated earlier, we might be on duty, or we're dealing with an incident, or it's a distressed child, or somebody's fallen over, or somebody's being bullied, or somebody's frightened of something, or we're preparing for the next lesson. And you know what? Sometimes in secondary schools, you have what people term as free lessons. They're not free. They're really for preparation. They're for an opportunity for you to catch up, to do some marking, to do some prep, maybe to put your displays up. Hey, look at my fingers. My fingers show, my thumbs. This was a woman who put displays up all the time. They're bent. And they don't have that break. So they use that time to do that. But in those preparation lessons, that's often when the head teacher or the deputy will say, oh, I've got a teacher absence. Can you cover that class? So those teachers in their preparation time that was supposed to be allocated to them will often go off to cover somebody else's class when they're away. It's just how it is. Myth or truth? Students always behave. No, they don't. They don't. I remember when I was training to be a teacher, and I asked that question, and I said, but what about pupils who don't want to learn? What about when there's bad behavior? What do we do then? And I was told, providing your lessons are adequately prepared, you will have no problems. That wasn't true. I did have problems. I had to learn how to classroom manage, and I had to learn that on my own. And it was trial and error. And sometimes I got it wrong. And sometimes, later on in my career, I got it wrong. Sometimes I pushed people into a corner and they pulled back. Sometimes I didn't let go. Sometimes I didn't notice. And I had to learn all those different strategies of classroom management, the strategies that observe the child at the back not paying attention, the young person who can't see the whiteboard very clearly, or in my case, a blackboard, the youngster who is struggling with the concepts that we're trying to deliver, the guy who's switched off because he's thinking about his sick mother at home, and all those sorts of things, and why people kick off, why people have inappropriate behaviors, and why people are angry, are stressed, are anxious, are tearful, are depressed. All those things come into play. Students don't always behave. We all know that's true. And as I said, the classroom management can be one of the hardest things for us to learn. It's about the discipline, self-respect, and mutual respect. You cannot expect students to respect you if A, you don't respect yourself, and if B, you're not respecting them. But there's a balance, and it's between rights and responsibilities. And it's about that classroom control. And it's not about going in there to be the friend. Go in like a tiger and out like a lamb is what used to be said, but there is some element of truth in that. It's knowing that I never went into classrooms to befriend new buddies. I've got my friends, I've got my family. I went in to try and ensure that those students were given the best opportunity for learning that could be had. And if at times I had to be tough, so be it. Because in being tough, as with parenting, that's because you love them and you care and you want the best for them. In giving into everything and accepting inappropriate behaviors and accepting poor discipline does them a huge disservice. And our children deserve better than that. But it's not always easy. It's not. I think I might have gone too far. Teachers have all the resources they need and they don't buy extra. Untrue, untrue, untrue. Teachers do not have all the resources they need. I inspect in a variety of schools. I inspect in schools that are hugely well equipped. They are phenomenal. And, sometimes I am in awe and wonder and shock at the resources that some schools are able to provide for their young people. I'm going to add to that, it doesn't necessarily mean they're outstanding schools in teaching and learning, but I'll shelve that to one side. I have been in other schools where the resources are minimal. In Africa, where they're learning to count with the tops of beer bottles as counters. I have been in schools in Zanzibar, where there's a shortage of paper and pencils. I have been in schools in the Gambia, where children have run after me, begging for more pencils so that they can go to school. What I do know is that many, many teachers in the poorest of schools, even in the well-resourced, and all those in between, they spend so much of their own money on buying more resources to try to make the teaching interesting, appropriate, challenging enough, and also to make sure those classrooms are actually worthy of being taught and learnt in. I have seen, and I've done it myself, going out and you see something and you think, oh, gosh, that would be really good in the classroom. I could make a shopping den there. I could build that for them. I could paint that. How many teachers during the holidays go in and they paint their own classrooms and they redo all the displays, and they do the shopping corner, or they do the art exhibition. It goes on. So as I've said, many operate on a low budget, and teachers generally want the best for their pupils, so they often buy extras out of their own money. And I'm moving on to the last one because I think we're coming to the end of my time. And the last one is a myth or a truth. Going into the teaching profession is a waste of time. It's a good one to end on. I don't believe that for one moment. I would change a lot of things in my life. I would try to be a kinder person when perhaps I wasn't kind. I would try to eat more healthily when I never used to. I would try to do more exercise when I never used to do so much exercise. I wish I had done a few other things. I never regret going into the teaching profession, never, even the hard times. It's funny, some of my toughest schools, I still am in touch with the students, and some of the toughest schools are the ones where the students were actually the closest. And even now I could walk down the street and somebody would shout out, "Hiya, Mrs. Russell Thomas, how you doing?" And I think, oh my goodness. I even, as a magistrate, went into a prison one time a number of years ago. I was asked to look around, and suddenly this voice said, "Hey, hiya, Mrs. Russell Thomas, it's me. Do you remember me?" And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what did I do so wrong that they've ended up in prison? But actually, the good news was they had a positive memory of me. So that was really nice. I wouldn't change it. I have worked with asylum seekers and refugees who are now doing amazing things across the world. I have worked with those with specific learning difficulties and special needs who are married with children and holding down really admirable jobs. And I've worked with youngsters who have had the most traumatic experiences in their life and who've actually kept in touch with me and said thank you, and told me that years and years later when I didn't even know I had made any difference at all. And I wasn't special. I wasn't the best teacher in the world, but I'm glad that I made some impact on some people. So although we've explored these myths around how easy teaching is, and we know that there's a heavy workload, and we know that there are these challenges and misconceptions, and actually very, very rude comments at times, teaching can be very rewarding. So I'd like to dedicate this to all the hardworking teachers, and to the head teachers, and to the support staff, and to the teaching assistants. Thank you. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, wow, that's so wonderful. You know, just give me a minute. And LinkedIn for this. Thanks a lot for taking time out, and I know that's midday of your time zone. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope all the teachers who watch this and others, you know, in the family of teachers, understand what actually they go through, so that they stop comparing teachers' job or you know. As you rightly mentioned, commenting on teachers' job, they may start supporting their working moms, working wife, who's teacher, right? So they may understand their struggle as well through this. Thank you so much for talking on behalf of many teachers. I think you were a voice of them today. I'm definitely, you know, when you were talking, I could feel that. I was thinking that, you know, what may happen when teachers watch this? They may feel so happy that someone is talking on behalf of us, or someone is talking those words which they in their mind, because when they tell to their family same things, they may not agree with them, right? They might think that they're just defending themselves, but someone else who is already, you know, who has work experience in same field and who have experienced all these comments and explanations. So this may send out a great message to the family to support teachers, and for students as well to understand teachers, you know, they sacrifice this. Thank you so much, Dee. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Pooja. I really have appreciated it.
Thank
And
you.
I am always in awe of many, many, many teachers, many different professions too. And at the moment, I'm in a poetry group, and it's my great privilege and pleasure that I'm actually being taught by an ex-pupil. So the roles are reversed. How lovely is that? And she's actually of Indian origin. And it's a Muslim poetry group, and we're in together, and it's really nice that the cycle has turned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.